Iran's drone and missile attacks on Israel over the weekend risk setting off a chain of events that could lead to all-out war between the regional rivals in the Middle East. All eyes are on now on Israel's response. Many governments are working around the clock to avoid a wider war in the region. For decades, Israel and Iran have been engaged in a shadow war. Attacks by Iran's proxy groups, most recently on ships in the Red Sea, have been part of wider efforts by Tehran to oppose Israel, to end its war in Gaza and supplant or replace or to supersede the US and to an extent Saudi Arabia as the foremost power in the Middle East. Tehran is no longer hiding behind proxies. It is now exposed to a direct attack from Israel. Going forward, Israel is not going to be able to sit quietly and intercept everything. US officials hope that any exchange between Iran and Israel will be short and contained and won't draw in other powers, but they don't know what's ahead. Israel's war cabinet is now faced with two good options for Prime Minister Benjamin. He may be tempted to tell US President Joe Biden that he can keep the situation with Iran under control, provided Washington supports Israel's planned offensive against Rafah. The alternative would be a direct attack on Iran. That would be a huge undertaking for Israel alone. And the US is signaling that it wants to avoid the bloodshed at any cost. If the US were to get drawn into a confrontation with Iran, it could divide perhaps permanently the Western democracies that would back Washington, such as the UK, and those who might sensibly prioritize renewed diplomatic outreach to Tehran. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was described as the most dangerous than anything Europe has seen since the end of World War II. It has triggered the worst crisis in Russia's relations with the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Even talk of a confrontation between Russia and NATO, a Cold War nightmare of leaders and populations alike, indicates the dangers of escalation as the West grapples with the resurgent Russia 32 years after the 1991 fall of Soviet Union. Ukraine President Zelensky has warned that failure to fend off Russia's aggression could spiral into confrontation with NATO, and that certainly means the Third World War. Zelensky said this in January. Last month, a Russian cruise missile violated NATO's airspace less than a week after Putin warned that a direct confrontation between Russia and the Western military alliances would be one step away from a full-scale World War III. Another concerning fact is that of China. It has long been assumed that the greatest threat to geopolitical stability is the growing tension between China and the US in recent years. A slight thawing led to a meeting between President Xi Jinping and Biden in November, but core issues remain, most notably over Taiwan and the question of its sovereignty. Beijing sees the island nation as an integral part of a unified Chinese territory. It has in recent years adopted an increasingly aggressive stance towards the island and its ruling Democratic Progressive Party, which is DPP, which it has denounced as dangerous separatist. At the same time, the US has ramped up its support financially, militarily, and rhetorically for Taiwan's continued independence. China's most senior officials in charge of Taiwan policy, other than Xi himself, told an annual meeting of Communist Party that Beijing must resolutely fight Taiwan's independence, separatism, and further grasp the strategic initiative to achieve the complete unification of the motherland. While most experts agree an imminent escalation is not on the cards, any invasion would be one of the most dangerous and consequential events of the 21st century. It would make the Russian attack on Ukraine look like a sideshow by comparison with the Chinese. Okay. Human cost aside, a military conflict between the world's two biggest economies will lead to a severing of global supply chains, a blow to confidence and crashing asset prices. It would have catastrophic economic consequences up to and including a second Great Depression. On top of that, North Korea, since talks with the Trump in 2019 broke down over disagreements about international sanctions on Pyongyang, Kim Jong-un has focused on modernizing his nuclear and missile arsenals. In his New Year's Eve address, he warned that the actions of the US and its allies have pushed the Korean peninsula to the brink of a nuclear war, and he announced that the Hermit Kingdom and abandoned the existential goal of reconciling with the rival North Korea. Alongside its military development, Kim has been chumming up to Russia and remaining on the right side of China. This has added greatly to tension on the peninsula and increased the chances of so-called miscalculation, where one side assumes that the other is about to attack and goes first.